Hey, Track Records, episode
How you
24,
doing?
double boxcars. What's going on, Barry?
Um, so when we l- last left off,
We don't need to go there. I think we already covered all of that. We can just move
no,
along.
we didn't. Um, you had mentioned you were talking about drummers not really getting a say, and the context was we were talking about bands and bands who perhaps are putting out music that some of them didn't want to be put out, some band members didn't want released or whatever, that sort of thing, and the dynamic within bands. But anyway, you not only did you insinuate, but you actually said, "Oh, being a drummer, you didn't really get a say." So um, that's that's a real um, misconception about drummers. Drummers, in fact, Um, I've talked to label people in the past, like really high up label people who were working for talent agencies in LA, looking for music to sign, looking for bands. You know, back when I was very active in that sort of thing, when I was still playing music, and one of the things I heard more than once that what A&R people are looking for, the first things they're looking for when they're checking out a band is the singer and the drummer. Um, and if you look back through history, all your favorite bands, almost 100% of them are going to have a drummer that is considered really good. Um, and from my own experience being in bands, um, being the drummer doesn't mean you don't get a say in the music. You're not necessarily bringing in demos of somewhat completed songs to the band to flesh out and make band songs. But again, this is my experience. I was always highly involved uh, in creating what ultimately became the song. The genesis of it was started through a jam, just a random jam, or say a guitarist or singer did bring in something that was a little more completed. Um, as a drummer, I always had a lot of input, and friends of mine who were drummers, same thing, always lots of input. And you could go even further. A band like Midnight Oil, their drummer Rob Hurst was actually one of the primary songwriters. So if you look at a lot of their records, a lot of the songs are credited to him, like exclusively to him.
And I think that's what I was really saying was that it's not that drummers don't have a say, it's that they don't get a credit. And so, for example, and that's different with the Midnight Oil drummer because he was a songwriter, but I don't think there's one Rolling Stone song, not one, that includes Watts as part of the songwriting credits. Even Mick Taylor got his share. Bill Wyman got some. But and I'm not disputing that. I do believe the drummer is a very important part of the whole process and can often you know make a song go a certain way that it wasn't going to go that way, or certainly emphasize or drive it. But how many drummers get the credit that I think a lot of them probably deserve? I think you know
I think with the Stones, it's probably a bit of an anomaly in the sense that they just rubber stamped everything with Jagger Richards, much like,
Lennon
m-
McCartney. Yeah.
yeah, similar to that. Whereas, let's use REM as an example. Um, all the songwriting credits, I think, throughout their entire run are credited to the four of them.
Right.
So, I think as far as arranging goes, drummers can have so much input, just like, any guitarist or bass player, singer, or any other
Yeah.
instrument, keyboard player. Um, I would argue, just like that A&R guy said, I would argue that they're even more important than certain other instruments that are typical for rock bands, because when you think about it, when you're listening to any rock song, the thing that you're feeling viscerally is the drums
Yeah.
almost more than everything.
No, I don't. Again, I don't disagree with that. Like I said, but like, how many credits did John Bonham get on Zeppelin songs? And he probably got more, but still,
a couple.
yeah,
And like there's this instrumental song on that Coda record
yeah,
that he is credited to all four of them.
yeah.
And I really do. I can't speak for other bands, but oftentimes I think it really is probably very unfair, you know, when a drummer isn't given his due as far as songwriting credit and royalties
Because
go.
I do think it impacts it. I was watching a video of Blondie doing "Dreaming" on some show, and it's Clem Burke's drumming that really, launches the song.
Yeah,
And,
that propels it.
yeah, and I think that if Bruce hadn't switched drummers, Springsteen, from Mad Dog Vinny Lopez to Mighty Max, his sound never would have been the same. Because Max an explosive drummer, a strong drummer, and Vinny was a different type of drummer.
He was much more he was much looser than
Yeah,
Max and sloppier, and played more less of a linear style than Max
yeah,
played, where it was more, I think, more feel oriented, groove oriented. It just kind of went with his feel more so than Max, who has like very concrete parts designed for
right.
each part of the song. And
Yeah,
I prefer I like both.
yep,
And to your point, Springsteen's sound changed so much when Max came on board.
yep,
A little trivia question for you. So
yep,
that happened after the second Bruce record,
yep,
and right before Born to Run.
yep.
However, Max doesn't play on the song Born to Run, which was recorded, the original version was recorded before the rest of the Born to Run album. Who
Right.
was the drummer who played on the version of Born to Run we all know and love?
It's definitely not Lopez. Um,
No,
and I'm sure I've heard this at some point. And it wouldn't be a studio drummer. It wouldn't be like Jim Keltner or something like that, because just Bruce wouldn't have had access to that at that point. So I don't know.
I don't know either. No, no, it's Ernest Boom Carter.
Oh, okay.
You've
Yeah,
heard that
I
name, I'm
have heard
sure.
that before. Yeah, and yeah, and again, like, I don't think that Springsteen would have been nearly as popular. Born to Run wouldn't have been as popular, that album, without Max. And also Roy Bittan, who's a very underrated part of the band. He's an incredible piano player. And up until then, there's more Danny Federici on the organ carrying the band. And Federici's a fine organ player, but he's not that talented, certainly compared to Roy Bittan. Fitting in behind Bittan, he's great. But it's sort of like pitchers on a baseball team. You've got your number one pitcher, number two pitcher, number three pitcher. And if you only have twos and threes or threes and fours, you don't have a strong enough team. Once you get that one, then everyone fits their slot. And I think once Roy Bittan joined the band, again, that gave everyone a lot more space and less importance, but it all fit together.
And was he also responsible for all the strings and arranging all the strings and stuff on a song like Jungle Land?
Yeah,
Was that
I
all
believe
Roy
so,
Bittan?
because it wasn't Springsteen. So I believe it was him. So
Like a real, and I think Bruce has talked about how much admiration he has for him as a real musician.
yeah, in a way that the rest of the guys in the band weren't, in a
Just
lot of
guys who had
ways.
been with him
Yeah,
since the
yeah,
Jersey
yeah.
Shore
And we're,
in 1968
and they were musicians, but they weren't musicians,
in the
and that,
classical sense.
yeah, and that's the thing. And so we're talking about Roy Bittan doing that arranging. That was where the Beatles, when they got George Martin. I mean, George Martin should get so much of the credit for a lot of the Beatles stuff, because without him, they wouldn't have been able. They had ideas, they had great ideas, but they didn't know how to get them onto record. And George Martin, was a huge part of that.
So
Um,
certainly took them to a whole nother level.
Yeah, and I think, and Jimmy Miller, the producer for the Stones, it was Jimmy Miller who was there for their four great records.
Mhm.
And then his drug problem was just just took him out of it. And then that's when then they went to Goat's Head Soup and Black and Blue, and that's when they really leveled off. We can't say that was because he left or what. I mean, I'm sure a lot of factors, but it didn't help. I think like drummers, like bass players, I think producers and engineers don't get nearly the credit they should in some cases.
Jimmy Miller was also the producer of my two favorite Traffic records.
Yeah,
The first one, Dear Mr. Fantasy,
yeah,
and the one after that, the self-titled, just Traffic.
yeah.
Man, those records are that they're up there for me with that run of Stones records. There's such great records. Do you know those two
Yep, yep,
records?
yep. I do. My brother was a big Traffic fan, so of course, I inherited his records and became a Traffic fan as well. And there are certain songs, certain Traffic songs, where to this day I like. I love. I just I can listen to over and over. Like sometimes I feel so uninspired. Such a great song. Then there are
It's a
other ones.
little later,
Yeah,
but
which is a later track. But then there are other songs like Dear Mr. Fantasy, which I've heard so many times that it's hard for me to listen to. Like we were talking about just going through you.
mhm.
That would be Dear Mr. Fantasy. One time I loved it, but it doesn't have the same staying power with me as opposed to Low Spark or the High Heeled Boys.
um, it's funny that you bring up that particular song, Dear Mr. Fantasy, because that's one of I would put that up there on the Mount Rushmore of great rock individual rock songs. And to this day, I when I hear that song, it gives me goosebumps.
And I think that comes down to a personal thing in terms of because again, I'm not saying it's not a great song. It is,
Sure.
but again, it's one that goes through me now, and
Yeah,
and
and I get that.
and I think that's just kind of random in terms of you know who that does it to and who it doesn't do it to. You were saying you could still listen to Sticky Fingers a lot right now, and I couldn't. Whereas there are plenty of other Stones albums I could absolutely listen to. And again, and I think Sticky Fingers is one of the certainly top 50 albums ever made, maybe top 25. I mean, it's a fantastic album. It's just a question of like just certain albums just I've heard way too many times and they don't stay with me as much. Yeah. But like I said, with Making Movies by Dire Straits, like 10 years later, I was able to finally get back to it. So I can do that too. And I could quite possibly do that with Dear Mr. Fantasy. I just need more time. So it was also
All
definitely
right.
one of the songs we used to get stoned to a lot. So
All right. Well,
Traffic is great drug music.
you've said it all.
Yeah. And so by the way, I've been listening to oh, actually one more thing I wanted to say. Did you do your road trip?
Yeah, I went to St. Louis.
Okay. Did you get my email about who was playing there?
Um, so yeah, I saw that,
Uh,
but the links didn't
The link
take
didn't
me to
work? Okay.
anything. It
Sorry
didn't
about
take me to anything, and I couldn't find anything about it.
okay, so sorry about the link, but I was just amused that Rush and
Oh,
John
and
Fogerty.
that's another thing I was going
Yeah.
to say. How it couldn't possibly be Rush. Rush is no longer.
I no, it said Rush and it was
That's something else then.
is anyone
A
left?
Rush. It's got to be a Rush tribute band. And which, by the way, I've been shocked to see how common these tribute bands are in the Midwest. Sometimes I'll look at music listings in Chicago or St. Louis, and I swear every club, about 90% of the nights are filled by tribute bands, whether it's to
Because real bands don't stop there.
Zeppelin or
Yeah,
no, they
yeah,
don't,
yeah,
or they're not around anymore.
yeah.
But just God, it's like so common, and so I can only assume that that was a
But
Rush tribute band because
uh,
they are definitely not together anymore. Neil Peart died.
right, that doesn't stop these guys.
It stopped them though.
Okay,
It
but
stopped them.
I will research that one some more to find out because it can't be a tribute band called Rush. Like
No,
that,
but perhaps the listing just
yeah, maybe they did it.
there was a mistake there, or perhaps you misread it. Maybe that was it too.
Yeah, it was on Polestar, and so I'll go back and check. Do you know Polestar?
Okay. Not personally.
Polestar, you can check out the listings for any music listings in any city. You put Polestar Seattle, Polestar Boston, Polestar Peoria, and then it'll give you all the shows up and coming. You can even do surrounding cities as well, but it doesn't differentiate. So you're going to get a Tom Petty tribute band like Damn the Torpedoes, and you're also going to get the Rolling Stones or whatever. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then the other person was John Fogerty who was playing, and I had no idea. I don't remember him still touring.
Yeah, he's been active. He's always out there touring, and he puts out the occasional record still, and
Does he? Okay.
often, yeah, and usually it'll be uh, not necessarily a record of new original music, but like a live record, that sort of thing,
Got
playing
it.
old Creedence songs or whatever.
Got
Um,
it.
and John Fogerty, I as much as I like him, I don't think I would go see him now.
And I would not either. And as a matter, I mentioned to you that I happened to see Donovan and Eric Burden, but that was at a South by Southwest, festival where they were just one of the many, gigs that Kim and I happened to stumble in to see. I wouldn't have, if they were, I wouldn't have gone out and purchased tickets just to see them.
Hmm.
There aren't many people like that. I'm trying to think of anyone I would go.
Any of the dinosaurs?
Yeah, I can't think of any off
There's
the top of my head that I would go that would
well,
pay money.
who are the ones still touring? So you've got your Fogerty, you've got your Dylan, who
Yeah.
is of
And
course it never stopped touring
yep, it's
ever.
a never-ending tour. Yeah,
I wouldn't go see him
I wouldn't go see
today.
him. I wouldn't go see Neil.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you as well.
I,
It's his he keeps putting out records. In addition to his archive series, which is
yeah,
all this great unreleased stuff, or like great live shows, 1975 from the Bottom Line, just
yeah,
him by himself,
I would
all
go to
this
that.
great stuff. Yeah, his I must say, and you know how much I love Neil Young.
Yeah,
His records of the last, I don't know, 20 years of new original material are all pretty mediocre at best, in my opinion.
Kim and I went to one of them. That was for Greendale, and that was horrendous. And man, the audience wanted to kill him. Like that was the mood. It wasn't disinterest; it was hatred. and he does only stuff off Greendale, which is sort of like a rock opera type,
I know.
concept record. Yeah,
I know
and,
it.
so just when we think we're done, he goes, and then I thought to myself, what about Grandma? And launches into all these other songs. And if I had a gun, I would have killed myself.
What about what?
Grandma, because he'd already gone over Grandpa in one part of Greendale.
Gotcha.
And
Gotcha.
just when you think it's over, he
Yeah.
goes, and then he launches into more. And this made it even worse. He comes back for an encore and does killer versions of Cinnamon Girl and one of his other classics, Cowgirl in the
Jane.
Sand. Yeah, Cowgirl in the Sand, and which is one of my favorites. And it was just great. And it was like, oh, the whole concert could have been that. And I don't need him to just play greatest hits concert. I'm not asking for that, but just Greendale was just atrocious.
But a couple things.
Yeah.
So going into that, you had to have known.
We did not. He did not say that. If he had said that, I wouldn't have bought tickets.
It was not advertised
No.
as a Greendale concert.
Yeah. Because if it had been, then okay, fair game.
That surprises me. And as much as I know what you're saying, yeah, it seems like he should have come back after doing the whole Greendale record, if he's going to do that, and then play a whole nother set of what everybody wants to hear.
Yeah.
But that's Neil for you. He's idiosyncratic,
yeah.
And he sticks to his guns, man. Whatever vision he's following, damn everyone else, damn the audience. And that's, I got to say, that's one of the things I love about him so much, because he's so true to himself and his own artistic vision. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it pisses you guys off, sometimes it doesn't, but he's driven to follow his own artistic vision, and I respect the hell out of that.
That's fine. I'll never buy tickets again, though. He's burned me 3 times.
Yeah. So the other time, I know you saw him at the taping of the Unplugged show,
where he kept doing the same Harvest Moon over and over and over and over and over. Okay, and until we finally left. And then the other one was, and once again, I didn't know. So and
before you go on to the next one, tell me more about the one in New York, the Unplugged show. So what do you mean he kept doing Harvest Moon? He did it like 20 times?
Yeah, like he'd do it. He'd start it and then stop it, then start it and then stop it, then play it all the way through and then not like it and play it again because they were recording it. And so,
Of
and he
course, they're
wanted,
recording it for the show. So
yeah,
literally, like it was like the number was that great.
yeah, to the point where John and I left.
Shit,
Yeah. And we,
that's
and I, there's MTV Unplugged and Neil Young. I wouldn't have left.
right,
You know, it took
right.
that much for me to
Huh.
go, okay, I can't stand this anymore.
So I have that record, and it's actually a pretty great show. The finished product is good, and it's somewhat of a cross section of his greatest hits
Mm.
and LP, deeper cuts. But um, what else did that show consist of? I mean, was that did he open with that, and then you left after
I think
20
I think he
versions of
did.
that, or
I think he did one song before that. It's been so long that I don't remember specifically. I think he
okay?
did one song before that, which was okay. I don't remember what the song was. Then did that, and then again, it was like so. So it was like going on. I don't know, like 45 minutes or an
Uh-huh.
hour. It felt like like 3 hours, but it wasn't that long. But until we're like, okay, I can't stand this anymore. And there
Right.
and just like I don't often walk out of movies, I rarely walk out of shows, but I have before. Even shows I've
But
bought tickets to.
I would think that getting a glimpse behind the curtain to see how that whole thing
I was
works would
excited.
be interesting.
I was excited.
Even with the stopping and starting and repeating, that stuff to me, I think that would have fascinated me.
And it may in a different mood, it possibly would have in a different, but I was like, fuck, I got better things to do than this.
Huh.
And like I said, maybe it just caught me at the wrong time. But again, it was annoying, and he was being annoying about it. Excuse me.
You all right?
Yeah, he was bitching and moaning about it,
About what?
about it, that it just what didn't sound right, that he wasn't getting the sound he wanted. So 1 second. I don't know if he was mad at the roadies, I don't, or mad at the band, but he was frustrated. And the fact that he was so frustrated, I think that's right. He even left the stage at one point. He did it like 3 or 4 times, left the stage for like 20 minutes, came back, and then went through the whole thing again. I was like, okay, we're out of here. But I remember Kim and I saw Cake, and after a few songs, like we were like, they're boring. We're out of here. And again, it's not like a South by show where we have a badge to see everyone. This was we bought tickets specifically to see them, and they were just boring in concert. And I will say, even when I saw Dire Straits in concert, and I'm a big fan, they were boring.
Hmm.
Um, whereas other bands I've seen,
What was the third time you saw Neil?
oh, and that
Curious about
this
that.
this was probably my fault in terms of like I should have known what he was going to play, and it was legendary Pink Dots, his rockabilly stuff,
Hmm.
and it was so boring, and we left. Um, and then I think he even played a few songs from Trans. I was like, okay, that's not helping.
Uh, on that note,
Yeah.
um, when I first moved to San Francisco, it was early '87, and he that year he put out a record called Neil Young and the Blue Notes.
Yep.
So much like the rockabilly record or trance or even Old Ways, the straight up country record, that was during that period of experimentation for him, where he was trying different styles for each record.
Right.
And there was a place called the Omni in Oakland, which was a little music hall, maybe seated 750 to 1,000 people or whatever. And he played 3 nights in a row before that record came out as like um, a precursor to touring it. And I went all 3 nights in a row, and um, to be able to see him in such a small place, and it was like a place without seats, so you're just standing there. And I got to tell you, it was a pretty memorable concert experience.
So,
Even though it was just all that Blue Note stuff,
yep.
I feel like that stuff is strong enough that, oh, that's okay. He's trying on a different hat here, obviously, but it was still really good and compelling, and enough that I went 3 nights in a row.
which is cool. So I moved to San Francisco a few years after that, as you know, and my friend Susanna from the gym I'm working at does private training out at people's homes, like the hoity-toity people. Okay, and I would go with her on these sort of road trips on the outside San Francisco, and because she had a convertible, and we just drive out there. She'd do her training, then we'd go have lunch. It was nice. So we'd go to visit one of her clients out by Half Moon Bay, and
Mhm.
she drops me at just some bar, and I'm at the bar, and it's not a big bar. Okay, and it's just a rinky dink bar. Okay, it's nothing. And I'm talking to the bartenders. I'm sitting there having a beer, waiting for her to be done. And he goes, "Oh, you should have been here last week, man." I said, "Oh, why was that?" He said, "Because Neil Young came in and played." I said, "Neil Young played here?" And he's like, "Yeah." He said he was doing it as a he goes, he was doing it as a then he goes, "What the fuck is that word?" I said, "Benefit?" He said, "Yeah, that's it." He was doing it as a benefit. And he went and played, like, remember the Mauna Loa that you and I would go to? Like
Mhm.
the bar was like that size,
Sure.
maybe twice that size. But again, we're talking small. And I was like, okay, I would have liked to have been at that. Like that must have been pretty fucking cool. I mean, it didn't hold more than 100 people.
He was famous for doing that in that area because his ranch is in that
Right.
area.
Yeah. And the
It's in
school.
Woodlawn, I
Yeah.
think, is the name of the place his ranch is. And in fact, I just picked up this record a couple weeks ago, and it's credited to the Ducks, and it's Neil and Bob Mosley, who was a guy in Moby Grape, and two other guys, and they were playing in this club. I think it was in Santa Cruz called the Catalyst, um, as the Ducks.
Yeah.
And actually haven't listened to it yet, but it's one of those legendary shows that have been bootlegged for years. And it's one of the things that he officially released recently as part of his archive series.
And I've never been that lucky. It's sort of like never having catching a foul ball at a baseball game. Like there were shows like in New Orleans where the Iguanas, a local band I really like, and Kim's friends with actually now, but I would go see them like frequently. And one time Springsteen was in town, and he just jumped up and joined him on stage for a few songs. Okay, those things, you hear those sort of stories over and over, or Neil just popping into a place to, or the Stones played a tiny bar in New Orleans. They just showed up and played there. I've never been lucky enough. I've never even heard it happening. The closest thing I ever came was when Kim and I were at South by one year, and a friend texted to say, "Get over here, get over to this stage," because Carbon Silicon was playing, and that was Mick Jones from the Clash, his last band, and so him and Tony James, and I raced over there and I did catch that. But you'd think out of all the shows I've seen in my lifetime, I get lucky just once where like someone like you're not expecting at all would just suddenly, pop up.
When a similar experience in San Francisco was at the San Francisco Comedy Festival that I went to with my friend Megan, who was in one of my bands back then. And the word on the street was Robin Williams was going to make an unannounced appearance at this, and so everybody is just you could just feel it in the crowd, like
Yeah.
everybody's expecting it. And every time, a door opens over
Yeah,
here or over there,
yeah,
everybody's looking.
yeah,
And it went on and on.
yeah,
We're sitting through all these other no-name comedians,
yeah,
just wait for Robin. But it was like at the height of his popularity, probably right around the time of Good Morning Vietnam,
yeah,
so late 80s,
yeah.
and just waiting on pins and needles and like for hours, it was like just it seemed like the show went on forever. And finally the night ended and he didn't show up.
And
So
it's
disappointing.
it's stuff like that. And definitely, again, pre-internet days in particular, you'd get those sort of buzzes of like, oh,
Hmm.
he's going to show up, this guy's going to show up, that guy's going to show up, or whatever. When I was working at the gym at Body Kinetics in San Francisco, Linda Ronstadt was a member.
Because she lived right up
Yeah.
above
Yes.
on in what's the name of that neighborhood?
Pacific Heights.
Pacific Heights. Yeah.
Yep. And I'm a big Linda Ronstadt fan. And so even though some of the people who worked there said she's kind of bitchy, I was like, I don't care. I'm going to meet Linda. I was so excited. Never saw her, not once. So, but
um,
always going to work. Today's the day. Today's the day. I'm going to meet Linda Ronstadt.
Robin Williams lived up there
Yeah,
too,
he
and
yeah, he lived near her. Yeah.
Michelle did see him at like a convenience store down in the bottom there, right at the beginning of Pacific Heights, between where we lived and Pacific Heights
The only
started.
person I ever saw accidentally like that, except for like actors in New York or LA, they'd be in a restaurant when I'd go in. But I was in a grocery store in Cambridge, and John Malkovich was like two people ahead of me buying groceries, and I was like, okay, what do you say to John Malkovich? And I couldn't think of what was the opening line. So
And really, what do you say to anyone
yes,
who
yeah, yeah,
you're a big fan of
yeah.
and they're famous and I mean, really, like, what do you say? I've seen people at airports or been places where these people who I somewhat worshipped, and I've never once gone up to anyone because really, what the fuck do you say? Oh, I love you so much. I love all your work. Blah blah blah. I just what's the point?
The only people I think I would go up to in terms of vocation would be writers, people whose books I've really enjoyed, because it's easier to talk about that. It's easier to have something to say, as opposed to if I saw Michael Jordan, I love the way you dunk, like or Pete Townsend, I love the guitar you play. It's not as easy, you know. But I don't go up to people, and also I don't want to be bothered. So I wouldn't want, like, I'm sure they don't want to be bothered. But my dad would make my sister and I do it to go get autographs, which is even worse. It's like, I don't even want to talk to you, just sign this piece of paper. What the fuck is an autograph? You
There's
know?
Johnny Busick. Go while
Yeah,
you're
yeah.
sitting at a Bruins game, go get his autograph.
My dad made my sister follow Dr. J into the men's room to get an autograph.
Yeah,
So
that's kind of dastardly.
yes. So
It's
and
funny though.
I asked Dave Cowens for his autograph on a plane once. He was in first class. I was way back in coach. I was like 13 or 14. I went up to first class and asked him for his autograph, and he fucking ripped me a new one. I was like a 13 or 14-year-old kid. He shredded me. He
What did he?
screamed at me to get the fuck out of first class and leave him
No
alone. And
shit.
I swear to God.
Wow,
Yeah. I was like,
that's
whoa.
that's awful.
Yeah.
It's one thing to be a little nonplussed
Yeah.
about it,
Yeah.
or like you're being asked that for the millionth time, but
Or it's during your dinner. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, that's something egregious.
Yeah.
Okay, maybe you can get a little snarky and perturbed, but to just rip a 13-year-old kid a new one, that's
I,
uncalled for.
I didn't ask anyone for an autograph for a while after that. By the way, speaking of things from the 70s, I've been listening to an audiobook of a book that you definitely need to get if you haven't already. It's called Cinema Speculation. It's
By
Quentin.
Quentin Tarantino.
Yes.
I bought that book uh, um, for the purpose of starting to read it when
Well,
I
that's a good
was
reason
in
to get a
when
book.
to read it when I was here, my new home,
Yeah.
waiting for all of my stuff to show up because there was a 2-week window where I was already here in my new location, waiting for my stuff to the delivery of all of my stuff was 2 weeks late. So that was the first book I read in Illinois and
Okay.
enjoyed it very much, of course.
So it was funny when
Obviously.
he was going on for about 10 minutes on Point Blank,
Hmm.
which we'd recently discussed.
Hmm.
And it was and like you and I discussed it for like a minute or two. He goes on in detail, and that's actually one of three books that was going to be a 3-movie trilogy, and they ended up only doing the first one and the third one. The third one being The Outfit with Robert Duvall. The
Hmm.
second one they never made into a movie. But and he talks about it then, as you know, Bullet and The Getaway and Deliverance and French Connection, and many other movies from that time. Um, Interesting thing. So as he's doing that, I was like, okay, well, how many of these movies can I find online, for streaming online? Because I know you'd recently watched Point Blank,
Hmm.
and they were hard to find actually. As a matter of fact, the only place you could find them, the ones that you could find, was Apple TV, but it wasn't even Apple TV. It was through the iTunes store,
Mm.
which is really weird. What did you own Point Blank, or what? Where were you watching it?
It was on the Criterion channel.
Oh, Criterion. So I guess Just
Yeah.
Watch doesn't cover the Criterion channel.
No, it does. It
It
does.
it doesn't come up on there.
But here's the thing.
Yeah.
It was just removed. So they have a section every month of leaving the
Yeah.
channel
Right.
at the
Yeah.
end of this month.
Yeah.
That was one of those that left, shortly
Sure.
after I watched it.
Got it.
So it could be in limbo right now. But and what I find is inevitably almost everything turns up eventually on another channel. It's very cyclical. Like I notice a lot of stuff that leaves the Criterion channel the next month shows up on Amazon
Right.
Prime
Yep.
or
And it is.
Canopy or
Yep.
something like that.
A-
So you just keep an eye out, and you will find virtually everything in that book.
But there's definitely then there's movies where I want to see again, and you can't even rent. Never mind stream for free. So an example is, did you ever see the Steven Soderbergh movie, The Underneath?
Yeah, with
Peter
Peter
Gallagher.
Gallagher. Yeah, I
Yeah.
saw that.
And
Yeah.
so I really liked it. And you can't stream that.
Well,
And Cement Garden, this British film about these
I've
kids and
I've seen it.
incest.
I
Okay,
know it.
once again, you can't stream it. Heavenly Creatures, one of my favorite films, can't stream it.
Early Peter Jackson.
Yeah, that's a great film.
It is good.
Yeah,
A very young Kate Winslet.
yeah,
I
and
think that might have been her breakout role.
yeah,
But what I was going to say is, usually, because I occasionally I'll run into something like that,
yeah.
but you can usually buy it on DVD for under $10.
And
You
so
know,
that is another, but it's just interesting. There's certain things, and you can now finally rent Carney, but it took me a while to find Carney.
What's that on? Because
Uh,
I was looking for that recently too.
I think Prime.
Okay.
I got to double check, but I think Prime. And another one, a Jeremy Irons movie called Kafka, about the writer Franz Kafka. And
Coincidentally, that's who
yes,
it's about.
that finally came to Prime. You know, there's a 1954 version of what's the Orwell book? 1984. There's a 1954 black and white version,
Yeah,
which is really cool, and that's hard to find.
never
That's my
seen
favorite
that.
version. So
I've never seen that and have never come across it. It doesn't seem to show up anywhere that I
I
can see.
I think I found that on YouTube, because that was the only way I could, see it. I saw it. They showed us that in high school, and I was like, man, that's fucking cool. And I've seen other versions since, and nothing ever matched that. And
So
that was black and white. So
did you like the one with that came out in 19, I think it came out in
19,
1984 with John Hurt?
no, but part of the problem was I liked that what I'd seen so much. It was hard for me to then like this.
Wow,
So I'd have to see it again.
I I I've always really loved that movie. Um, John Hurt, of course, plays Winston,
Yeah,
and a very old, close to death Richard Burton is in it as well.
I
I
wouldn't have
think that
remembered that.
I thought that was so well done. That's one of those books you read as a late teenager or
Yeah. Oh,
middle
great book.
teenager,
Yeah.
and to see it translated to the big screen, and what I thought it was translated so well, it just captured the feel of the book, much like um, Kubrick's version of A Clockwork Orange. To me, just totally nailed the book. I thought this version in 1984 did as well.
This is interesting. Anthony Burgess wrote Clockwork Orange when he was completely penniless and bankrupt. And basically, if that book hadn't sold, he was going to basically have to kill himself because he was that broke. And that just saved him. And Clockwork Orange really works in color. 1984, like again, seeing that first version in black and white, it's like it just made more sense to me in black and white, as opposed to something like Brazil, which is another film I love. And that the color, that's fine. But that Brazil has a sort of 1984 feel to me.
Who um who directed that original 1984? And was it an English production?
It was not. It was American production. I'll look up and see who the director was. I don't think it was a named director.
Hmm.
But again, I'll have to check that out because again, like I said, I saw it in high school, and back then, I wouldn't have paid as much attention
Sure.
who was the director, who was the actor, the way I
Right.
would now.
Um,
Because now I'm like, okay, I'll see that film because it's Jonathan Demme. I don't know anything about it, but I like Jonathan Demme. I'll give that film a shot, or I'll see that film because of it's I don't know, Charlize Theron. I'll see anything with Charlize Theron. So, um,
even the Battle for Seattle.
what's the Battle for Seattle?
It was the film version of the WTO protests that took place in downtown Seattle
Oh no, I don't know
in
anything about this.
1999.
Okay.
Big deal. It was a huge rioting in downtown Seattle in 99.
News
Man,
didn't
this
make it
was
out to the East Coast about that.
Oh, it did. You just don't remember it. But anyway, it must be one of the biggest steaming piles of you know what that was ever put to film.
I never
It's
even heard of it. Like I
horrible.
said, so
Yeah, just horrible. If you want a good laugh,
yeah.
watch that movie. Um, Speaking of movies, I watched that documentary you recommended, Born in Chicago.
Oh yeah.
Wow, that's good.
How cool was that? And that I'm
Really
sure you've
good.
never seen a lot of those clips. I hadn't ever seen any of those clips. So,
No.
and
So
that's great as opposed to, oh yeah, I've seen this before. I've seen this before, you know.
um the Muddy Water stuff, the Howlin' Wolf stuff. I've never really gone down the blues rabbit hole.